started. I'm sure some other people will join us momentarily. But thank you all for coming to this Mid-Hudson Streetlight Consortium call. We're happy you all rallied after we decided to cancel the other day. We figured that a number of you had better things to do, or certainly more pressing things to do, not better, but more pressing things to do on Friday as the snow was pouring down. So thanks for coming back. This is part of a series of calls that the Mid-Hudson Streetlight Consortium is doing with municipalities, and we've organized it by utility territories. On the call with me, we have Jen Metzger and Nina Orville of the consortium, and I don't think we have George Woodbury.
Yeah, you do. I'm here.
Oh, hello, George. Hello, George Woodbury. We will be going through the outline. Can you all see the outline that's up on the screen? Well, I guess a number of people are just calling in, but if you have logged in on computer, let me know if you can see that.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, good. And then we also have a series of really great questions that came in from Jeff Allison, so we're going to try to make sure we get to those. I think it was Jeff Allison. And, you know, of course, the purpose of today's call is to help municipalities get on the path to make a decision about streetlight acquisition, if that is your interest. I'm going to turn it over to Jen Metzger unless someone else has something very pressing that they want to interject at this point. Any questions, concerns? All right, Jen, over to you.
Thanks, Pat. Okay, as Pat mentioned, today we're going to be talking about the process of purchasing your street light system and then converting to LEDs. If you are interested in learning about NYSEG's utility-owned options, we can have a separate call about that after the PSC completes its review of NYSEG's proposal for LED options, which will probably be next month. The new tariff, I think, is supposed to come into effect in April, I believe. We have some concerns about this proposal, and we are filing comments and recommendations with the PSC this week, and would be happy to share those comments with you if you are interested. So before we get into the process of taking over streetlight ownership, I just want to quickly review some of the benefits and costs of owning your streetlights and converting to LEDs. You should all have received from Pat a draft copy of the chapter from our LED streetlight assessment on this topic. So I'm just going to sort of breeze through them, but the costs and benefits. But as a reminder, this report is still in draft form, and therefore we're not publicly distributing it at this point, but wanted to share with you the findings in a preliminary way. In our analysis of the municipal ownership pathway to LED conversion for NYSEG territory, we found that municipalities could reduce their street lighting costs by up to 50 to 60% if they purchase their street light systems and converted to LEDs. However, because fixture rental costs are lower in NYSEG territory than they are in other service territories, it takes a bit longer for this investment to be paid back by the savings than it does in other service territories. We estimate about 5 to 7 years. If you finance through bonding, you can see savings, within the first year, but there is a longer payback period. Now, just so everyone's clear about how we calculated the savings potential, what we did is we had the inventory for the entire NYSEG service. That's actually not NYSEG and Rochester Gas and Electric Service Territory. It's like 80,000 lights. And we developed just a representative portfolio of those lights based on what we knew about the entire service territory. So you really have to, and we'll discuss this a little later, but you have to really get to know your own particular inventory of streetlights within your municipality. If you have lights, a composition of lights that's very different from, the average composition in the service territory, then the savings will be different potentially. So I just wanted to make that note. In terms of energy savings, you can also see greater energy savings through municipal ownership and conversion to LEDs. You could see up to a 77% reduction in energy use compared to a 66% reduction that you would get by if you went with NYSEG's proposed LED options, assuming that they're going to be approved. And the savings are greater because you have greater control over fixture wattages and can better size your LED replacements than the utility has done. So what are the other benefits of municipal ownership? As I mentioned, you get to choose the LED lights that are most appropriate for your community. This is not just wattages, but styles, makes, models, the lighting color temperatures. Some municipalities may prefer a warmer lighting quality of lighting than the utilities options provide. You're in a much better position to implement an LED conversion that your residents and businesses will be happy with if you own the lights. If you own the lights, you're also in a better position to take advantage of advanced functionality. This is a very cool thing about LED street lights. They can be used as a communications platform for other town services, such as water meter reading. You can also dim the lights at certain times in the evening to realize greater energy savings, although just on that point, the utilities are all going to have to change their tariffs to, or their rates to allow for this, for you to realize the economic savings from dimming your LED lights, putting them on a timer, et cetera. And we will be weighing in on that with the utilities. With ownership comes new responsibilities, such as maintaining the lights and taking the necessary precautions to address unanticipated events. For instance, if a storm takes out some lights or a tree runs into a pole and knocks it down, you have to have the capacity to respond to calls about streetlight outages. These services, both, the responding to calls and undertaking the actual maintenance can be outsourced or they can be done in-house. That's a decision that you'll have to make. And just to let you know, we are going to set up a separate call to address issues specifically related to LED streetlight procurement and ongoing maintenance. So those issues we will address later. Today we're just going to focus on taking over the existing streetlights for the utility. Okay, so moving on to the regulatory context for the transfer of ownership of your system. You might reasonably ask, why do I have to purchase these old lights? How could they possibly have any value? And that is a reasonable question, but on the utilities books, they still do have some, they often still have some undepreciated value. And the Public Service Commission, Public Service law actually requires that you purchase the asset from the utility. They can't give it to you. But the savings tend to be so great that the purchase is usually worthwhile. So in 2015, not long ago, the state legislature passed a law intended to make it easier for municipalities to purchase their street light systems. And there is now a real actual process with steps and time frames that are spelled out in the utilities tariff rather than just left to the discretion of the utility in one-on-one negotiations with municipalities. And just so everyone understands, a tariff is a document that contains the utilities' rates, their policies, and rules, and it's a public document that has been reviewed and approved by the Public Service Commission, and you can find it on the Public Service Commission website, and we can also send you the link to NYSEG's tariff. So let's just quickly walk through the steps that you would undertake to begin and complete the process of taking ownership of your streetlights. The first step is to let the utility know that you're interested in purchasing the system and request an estimated purchase price. The utility then has, under its tariff, has 90 days to respond to you with an estimate. And if you agree to that, and if you then, if you want to move forward with the process, you have to let the utility know, and then you'll receive a copy of an agreement that you will negotiate with them for the purchase of the lights. Indicating that you want to move forward with the negotiating process once you receive the estimate does not mean you accept the estimate. You can try to negotiate that down with the utility. But once you've come to a mutually acceptable agreement with NYSEG that's signed by both parties, the utility then has up to 60 days to file that document with the Public Service Commission for review and approval. The Commission has to approve a sale of any asset by the utility, and that process can take anywhere, the Commission review and approval process can take anywhere from 3 to 6 months. And then after the Commission approves it, you move to an electricity delivery only service, and you no longer have to pay rental charges for your fixtures. So the time frame for this whole process from start to finish could take a minimum of 6 months, around 6 months, and a maximum of around 13 months, assuming 2 months for the municipality and the utility to negotiate the terms of the purchase agreement, and the municipalities, the governing board, municipal governing board's approval of it once you've reached an agreement. The process could be shortened to 5 months if the utility responds promptly to a request for an estimated purchase price, and if the municipality negotiates and approves the agreement more quickly, and if the PSC signs off on the agreement in 3 months. So, but you're looking at really probably around a minimum at least of a 6 months, maybe 5 months process, and maximum of a year or so. So let's turn now to the actual agreement, the contents of the agreement you'll be negotiating with NYSEG. The formal title of that agreement is the Street Lighting Pole Attachment Agreement between NYSEG and your municipality. And it spells out, exactly what you're buying, the price and the conditions for the purchase, the rights and obligations of the municipality and the utility with regard to the transfer and ongoing operation and maintenance of the streetlight system. So the big question you probably all are interested in is, how does NYSEG calculate this purchase price estimate? And that is basically one of the starting points of your negotiation. NYSEG first looks at what you have, your inventory, the size, type, and age of your existing lights to determine the net book value of that asset. And once the inventory has been confirmed, NYSEG uses a methodology that's called the present value of return on assets. And basically what this does is it takes the net book, it incorporates the net book value of the asset as well as the company's expected, the expected future return on the street lights if the utility continued to own it. And then it tacks on another 7% for administrative and general expenses. And if you have any questions about this methodology, we can, talk about it at the end. And George Woodbury has had a lot of experience in negotiations and can weigh in with his expertise as well. But just to give you some examples of recent purchase prices in NYSEG territory, the town, both of these are not, this is I think it may be the village of Horseheads and also West Seneca. These are way upstate not in the Mid-Hudson Service Territory, but the PSC recently, in the last year, approved the purchase of the systems. And for Horseheads, the average per light price was $101. And for West Seneca, the average was $250. So that it was quite a range. I want to mention the big caveat that this includes, these prices may include things other than the lights and the arms. For instance, West Seneca bought some poles. I think in both cases they had to pay for some underground cables. So, but this is just to give you kind of a rough idea of what it has cost other municipalities. Now, you should definitely try to negotiate the price down, and you'll be in a better position to do it if you've undertaken an assessment of your streetlights in advance and gotten
Jennifer,
yeah.
George.
Sure.
Can I just inject a comment?
Sure.
The methodology that NYSEG is using, which is replacement cost new less depreciation, was tested in the California courts in Marin County Superior Court and rejected by the courts as an approved methodology because it results in the utility gaining profit or enrichment that they would not have otherwise gained had they retained ownership of the asset. So you clearly should get involved in a negotiation with the utility over this because I think you're in a very strong negotiating position.
Okay, thanks, George. I do want to say that really wouldn't, just to add that really wouldn't apply in New York, though. And the commission, we had actually been pushing for, George, this whole team had been advocating that a single methodology be used across all of the utilities in New York State that is just based on, the book value, net present value, and net book value, but unfortunately, what was approved was that the utilities can use whatever methodology they choose, and it's pretty much, and all of the utilities actually use different methodologies. This doesn't mean that you shouldn't try to, bring this up, this unfairness that has been pointed out elsewhere up in your negotiations with the utility, but just so you know the regulatory landscape in New York. So just to go back, it is very important that you get an understanding. As I said, it's very helpful to get undertaken an assessment of your street lighting independent of the utility of your existing lights to know what condition they're in. And I also want to point out that the utility is now required to share with you all of the information upon which its cost estimate for its streetlight system is based. And this was as a result of an October 2016 Public Service Commission ruling that we'll talk about in a moment. And actually, if you trace it back further, it's a direct result of that 2015 law that I mentioned that the state legislature passed. So ultimately, of course, the utility does have greater bargaining power since it's up to NYSEG. The decision of whether to sell the asset is up to NYSEG. We can't force them to sell it, but you can still negotiate the price down. It is a negotiation. You can still try. I just want to note that keep in mind that you'll end up replacing the existing lights with the LEDs, but you'll continue to use the arms, the existing arms on your existing lights, if assuming that they're in good enough condition. And also keep in mind that you're buying this equipment as is. That's very clear in the agreement that you'll be negotiating with the utility. If you discover a problem later with the equipment, you can't go back to the utility and make them fix it. Of course, the utility continues to be responsible for their own equipment to which your streetlights are attached, you know, in the energy delivery infrastructure generally. You will just own the lights and arms, maybe poles if you purchase those too. But okay, now once you've purchased the system.
Excuse me, Jen, it's Kevin with the town of Bedford.
Yeah.
Just to interject, there's also a requirement from NYSEG that a fuse be installed.
Yeah, I'm about to get to that.
Oh, my apologies.
Thank you, Kevin.
No problem. While you were going over what you own and what you don't own in the transition, I figured I'd point that out.
No, thanks so much. And I'm about to get to those other added costs. But once you purchase your system, you'll have to pay a monthly pole rental fee unless you own the poles. And in 2017, according to NYSEG's tariff, this costs about $1 per pole. And again, that's in the utility tariff. It does go up, like all utility rates do, by a few percentage points a year. A couple of other things you should know. A recent PSC order ruled that utilities can no longer charge certain costs they had been imposing on municipalities when they buy their streetlight system. We had submitted comments. The Mid-Hudson Streetlight Consortium had submitted comments to the Public Service Commission identifying charges that we argued were unfair, and the Public Service Commission actually agreed with us in several instances. So this October 2016 order basically says they shouldn't be doing this. So for instance, Horsehead's agreement gives NYSEG the right to periodically survey and inspect your streetlights at your expense. This is no longer allowed, so make sure that your agreement does not include this provision. NYSEG is also not allowed to charge you for a pre-construction survey, which is also a provision that was in the Horseheads agreement. So, you know, make sure these provisions are not there in the copy of the agreement you get. And you can refer to the Commission's Public Service Commission's order of October 14th, 2016, approving tariff amendments with modifications. If to back up what you're saying with the utility. Okay, so let's see. The rights and responsibilities with regard to operation, maintenance, repair, and replacement of lights. Let's talk about that for a minute. Okay, so one of the requirements, well, actually all of the utilities require this. After you take over ownership of your system, you're going to have to tag your lights, put a tag on them, put a tag on each light, identifying the light as municipally owned, and you have 24 months to do this from the date of signing the agreement. These tags cost about $1 a piece, just so you know, and you would likely install these when you install your LEDs. That would make the most sense. To Kevin's point, you will also have to install what's called an inline disconnect fuse, which provides a physical demarcation between your new property, your streetlights, and the rest of the utility's infrastructure. The fuse allows you to disconnect from the system or de-energize it when you install the LEDs or anytime you're working on the lights. And just like the tagging, you have 24 months after signing the agreement to install the fuse, and the most appropriate time to do this would be, or less costly time to do this would be when you install your LEDs. Let's see.
That turns out to be a $50 or $100 item. It's not inexpensive.
Okay. Yeah.
Actually, no. I'm buying these for about as little as $14 and as much as $21 or $22.
I'm talking about installed.
Well, if you're doing it in conjunction with an LED installation, we're seeing about a $10 labor associated with it. So all in, it's about $32 to $33 an item.
But you know what?
My best price so far has been 50, but thank you for the feedback.
Well, that's good to hear. And again, these are exactly the kind of questions we're going to be talking about in the procurement call, because that's going to be, I encourage you all to participate in that, and we can get a sense of the different options, different costs for different types of procurement options, and we draw on George's experience in this area. So just to finish up really quickly, you know, the another provision, you're going to be responsible for tree trimming branches around the lights if a branch, you know, blocks a light, for example. You know, that's really about it. I mean, you have to have your town attorney, of course, review the agreement closely, but it covers, you know, insurance, indemnification, like all of the basically the standard issues in a contract. So I'm going to stop there. Maybe what I should stop here and see if there are any questions about specific to the utility, the purchase process, or before we talk about next steps. Are there any questions about that?
Is it okay to interject specific Bedford questions? We are actually moving further along in the process. I obtained a proposal, I'm going to say 9 months ago, and was able to negotiate it down from about $200,000 down to $160,000, but it's still $280 a light. That number's a little bit wrong because it includes about 7 poles, but over 571 lights, that's not that much of a difference.
Are they all above ground? Sorry, are they all above ground fed lights? Okay.
They are. I think the issue here is that we had a bunch of storms in the last 10 years, 5 or 6 really, that have taken down a lot of poles, and as part of that, NYSEG replaced a lot of the lights, so their present value is a bit higher than perhaps on average throughout the state.
But now you also have a lot of mercury vapor lights, though, don't you? Do you?
Yes, we do. I don't know about a lot, but we have some. Yeah, yes, we have some.
Oh, okay, all right. Because of course those should not have any value left.
Right, of course, they're ancient, yeah.
Right.
But we mostly have high-pressure sodium with some metal halide, but there are a couple of mercury lights around.
Okay, but it's mostly high-pressure sodium. So that's an interesting point. That they
right. So unfortunately, my purchase price is much higher than the numbers. Well, I guess $250. You said for West Seneca. That's not too far off.
Did you have a paper audit done? A billing audit of your street lighting done?
No.
Okay.
I've confirmed that the number is right, meaning the number we're being billed for matches NYSEG's inventory. But the actual audit would occur. The way I'm looking to move forward is to use the U.S. Communities Gray Bar contract. And as part of that, there would be an audit throughout the process, so any change found in the number of fixtures would be reconciled at the end.
Great. So this actually starts getting to the next steps conversation. But the first next step we highly recommend is to get a paper audit, a billing audit done of your streetlights, an independent audit done. Typically, this is done through a consultant who has expertise in this area. And what they do is they generally don't charge or at least the one that my town used didn't charge a fee. It just basically takes a commission from whatever overcharges they find, a sizable commission. But in our case, I'm on the town council in the town of Rosendale. We have 190 lights and had this company, Computel, do a billing audit, and they found $30,000 of overcharges. And the reason is because the utilities are terrible record keepers of their street lighting inventories, and This is common. I'm in Central Hudson Territory, but the refunds have been as big as $100,000 in NYSEG territory. So it is something you should undertake, because when you purchase your system, you want to make sure that what you're purchasing is actually exists. In terms, that the wattages that you have are that the utility has on its books, for instance, the wattages, the light types, etc., matches what's in the field. So it can save you some money to do that in advance. And then that's just a billing audit. It's also valuable to do an actual field assessment of the condition of your lights. And it also informs your lighting design plan for your LEDs. It can inform your lighting design plan, but it can also really strengthen your hand in your negotiations with the utility. If you know, for example, that, if your mast arms are totally rusty, or if the condition's in really bad equipment and you have that documented in an assessment, you can make that case in your negotiations. So I just want to put that out there. These things are not essential, but they can save you money and can help you in your negotiations.
Jen, if I could, this is Nina, if I could just interject one point as well regarding the billing audit. It's really important to do that before you move forward with LED streetlight conversion for a couple of reasons. One, as Jen said, it might help lower the cost of the purchase of the existing lights if there are discrepancies and the technology is different, for instance, than what the utility indicates in their inventory. But also, it's critical to do it before you convert your lights and make changes to the utility streetlight inventory, because if you change your lights without putting in the claim for overbilling in a way that you can document, you forfeit the opportunity to recoup that amount that has been overbilled. And those billing audits enable you to make claims going back 6 years from the date of the audit for any overbilling, which is why the amounts that can be recovered by municipalities can be so significant, because it's really 6 years of overbilling that you're able to claim.
Thanks, Nina, and that's true. And NYSEG's the purchase agreement will specifically prohibit you from recouping any refunds from past errors. You're buying the system as is, and that's it. You can't make any more claims against it. So now is the time.
Yeah. Right.
So can you elaborate a little bit more on the billing audit as to, are there several companies that you have seen do it successfully, and how are they actually determining the type of fixture that is installed? Are they looking at the tag on the light, or exactly how does it work?
Yep, they do. They know what to look for when they're looking over. Yeah. They have to get a bunch of, all of the paper from the utility, and they kind of know what they're looking for. I mean, in Rosendale's case, I think a lot of our refund had to do with we were getting charged for a bunch of poles that we didn't have. But anyway, they do field verify any discrepancies. So that's how there are a couple of companies that we know about. I can speak to Computel, which is the one that we used, and for Rosendale, they took a 40% commission from. They took 40% of the overcharges as their fee. So, they discovered 30,000 of of overcharges and took 40% of that, we got the check from the utility. There's another company that does that. Pat, maybe you want to speak to that company?
Yeah. I'll be sending out these names after the call. It is Troy and Banks. They're in the Buffalo area. Sorry, my screen is kind of tiny here, but I'm putting up their contact information. So we have heard from municipalities that have used Troy and Banks. They had a positive experience. And so I'll be sending around these phone numbers and websites when we get off the call.
Yeah, and one town did it on their own with volunteers. They did it as a part of a larger volunteer assessment, but they found that Central Hudson was billing them for a couple of lights that didn't exist or were not on town property. They were actually privately held. And they were able to get a credit to their bills. You know, again, they're less, the consultant is able to get you a check, a refund, so because they're experienced in that. But a municipality did succeed with volunteers in getting about $5,000 credited to their account and their inventory.
And we do have, I think, a number of people on the call participated in that webinar we had a few weeks back, but we will send out that presentation from the town of Marbletown about how they did it.
Any other questions?
A few questions.
Sure.
I guess the first one's really a comment. As you go forward, think about insurance, meaning you're now buying significant infrastructure and need to insure it. I've gotten proposals at Bedford, and it's not very expensive, but if you have a storm come through and wipe out 50 lights, it can be quite costly. The second, safety of the location. So sometimes what I've seen is that we'll find that NYSEG is willing to work on something, but other contractors may not be. So you might have a light that is close to a secondary or primary wire. Is there some way to address that before the purchase? If you don't, I think you're going to find that NYSEG is saying we'll charge you to come shield the wires.
You know, I'm sorry, but I was getting another call, and so it beeped out your half of what you said. I didn't hear, but if you could, about the location of the lights on the
Sure. Sometimes the light is installed such that the fixture itself or the arm is relatively close to the electricity wires.
Right.
And I found in converting some of the Con Ed ones that they actually want to charge you, Con Ed, to insulate the lines so you can safely do the work. Whereas, of course, you know, NYSEG's got locations they're willing to work, but other contractors may not be. Is there any way to protect yourself against that before the purchase?
I'm not sure about that. Maybe George can speak to that. I do know that in terms of if you are using you know, the existing arms, you can, you know, as part of the agreement, NYSEG is giving you the okay to install the LEDs where they're located, but if you are installing new lights, they require that you install the lights lower down, that the arm is actually lower down on the pole away from their infrastructure, and in the agreement you'll see there's a map of the space where you're allowed to locate them. But
yeah, we're going to be replacing at least a quarter of our arms, so I'll have to look at that.
Right. Yeah, it'll be farther down, and it's preferable, I would think, to do that. George, do you have any comments about that?
Yeah, I do. The other issue is as long as you're using workers that are qualified under OSHA 1910.269, they meet the same qualifications as the line workers do for Con Ed or for the utilities, and we've been successful by using those kinds of folks to do the work, be allowed to do pretty much anything we need to do.
In the case I'm mentioning, there were certified workers, but they were just saying these are too close to the wires, it doesn't meet. I imagine they're saying Con Ed shouldn't be working on them either.
Well, and the other issue is if you're going to be doing that, we would have to have a real hard look at what the rules are, because if under some utilities, and I haven't studied this particular one, you can request that the utility remove an asset, and if it's more than a certain age, they will remove it at no cost. You then would get into the business of negotiating with them a license for a new attachment on the same pole. So this is it's an interesting issue that I would want to dig into a little bit more detail before I gave you some advice.
Okay, I don't have a feel for how much of an issue it was, and it ended up being 2 out of 30 polls in Con Ed, which isn't a large number, but is a decent percentage. I got Con Ed to do it for free by some discussion, and as far as protecting the wires and protecting the workers, but I don't know if I have the same luck in NYSEG.
Right.
I'm fairly certain, George, that it is the case. I'm actually looking. I have included information about this in our assessment, but each utility has policies about, taking away their, removing their equipment upon request and the costs involved. And I know in Central Hudson Territory, there's no cost at all. You can just request it and they will remove it. And I believe in ONR and NYSEG territory that, as you said, it relates to the age of the equipment. I think it may have been 5 years. If I can send you guys a note about that. If it's over the equipment's over 5 years old, I believe that there is no cost to removing that equipment, and you could, as you said, start over.
Yeah, keep in mind 5 years is unusual. I normally see 15 years as the minimum, but the reason for that is as a part of the tariff and in their capital investment recovery, they include the future cost of removal. So the concept being is when I install the light, I include as a part of the installation cost the future cost of removal to restore the pole back to the condition it was before I install the light. So you're paying for that removal. And normally what they'll say is if it's less than 15 years old, then you'll pay the unamortized value of their investment. But if it's over 15 years old, then they'll remove it at no cost.
Okay, I just found the tariff provision, and the 5 years is for ONR, but for NYSEG charges the remaining book value of the fixture being taken out of service.
Which is the same as if you purchased it.
Yep.
So essentially, if you purchase the system and you want to remove a bunch of these, they'll remove them then at no cost, no added cost. In other words, you could not buy the ones you didn't want that you were going to move and then pay them what you would have paid to buy them in the first place and have them removed.
Right.
So the total cost would remain constant.
Right. Yeah. Looks that way.
But this is subject to negotiations, and this is one I would love to get into because I think that the utility's in a losing position. They have the strength because they're the utility, but legally they're in a very poor position given precedents. So it'd be fun to negotiate this.
Be careful what you offer, George.
This stuff is, I enjoy this stuff.
Okay, are there any other questions?
I have a question. This is Dan from the town of Bethel. So I'm just thinking a few years ago we had the Hurricane Sandy was up here, and there was a lot of poles out.
Yeah.
Poles are out, lights are out. And then so the municipality is going to own the street lights. And am I understanding that there's going to be insurance in case something happens, so the municipality will probably be covered. But doesn't it sound like more of a big deal, not only for the insurance, but for the actual, NYSEG's out fixing poles, we're trying to fix lights with our crew that we hire, is that underestimating the possibility of a problem?
George, do you want to take that?
I've been doing this for 17 years now. I've set up contracts in over 100 communities, have been in place since, well, as early as 2000. We've never had a problem.
Okay.
What I normally would recommend, you're responsible
ahead.
If the utility replaces a pole, say a pole gets knocked down or the pole is aged and they need to replace it, you're responsible to remove your fixture from that pole, or they'll remove it and leave it there, and then you have to reinstall it, and then you have to pay them for a reconnect fee.
Right, but the pole is their responsibility unless you buy the pole.
The pole is their responsibility, and normally those costs are defined in advance, and I always allow for, in my budget forecast, a contingency to cover that sort of thing, which is also one of the things that when we do a field audit, we want to look at the condition of the poles so we have a sense that is the utility likely be doing a lot of this going forward, or are the poles generally in pretty good shape, or, how many double poles are there? That's part of the audit process, is to try to capture that information.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
Sure. Sure. I mean, we also, we recommend that, you set aside some of your savings from, taking ownership of the lights and converting to LEDs for a contingency fund. I mean, you'll insure it, but it's always, it's always prudent to have, a fund to address any kind of unanticipated situations. So that's another thing. And then you can just contribute, or dedicate any of those unused funds to, eventually down the road, LEDs last a long time, but eventually they will need to be replaced. So unused funds can go toward, the eventual replacement of the LEDs. These are all the kinds of issues we'll be talking about in the next call on procurement and ownership maintenance. Any other questions?
Jen, it's Kevin from Bedford again.
Mm-hmm.
One more question on make-ready work. Mm-hmm. So in the Horseheads agreement, there's a section on make-ready, and it talks about any cost the utility would incur, relocating their own facilities, guy wires, et cetera.
Right.
Most of what we're talking about is existing lights, so I can't imagine there's a lot of it. But I just wondered if the experience with the utilities that have so far converted, or I should say municipalities, showed any issues or significant cost. I spoke to the folks at Horseheads, and they were very cooperative, but they did it through an outside company, so they really didn't have a lot of the details.
Yes, and that was the same experience I had. I spoke with Horseheads too, but they had left everything pretty much to their contract. They had a turnkey, outfit.
It was an energy services contractor, yeah.
Exactly. So, we really don't really know. It is important to just keep in mind, as we said, that there certain some of the things they list for make-ready work, they're not supposed to be charging municipalities, according to the Public Service Commission, in their October 2016 ruling. I mean, let's see, I'm trying to find that section of the agreement. I know, for instance, I recall, for instance, that they were including in make-ready work surveying doing a field survey of your lights prior to the sale. They should not be charging you for that.
Right, it's Article 7 on page 7.
Yeah, yeah. Let's see. Yeah, so they say, you know, in the Horseheads Agreement, they say make appropriate surveys of the poles. They can't charge you for that now. And the inspections, again, they should not be charging for either. The engineering that you mentioned, you know, that's unfortunately we don't have much experience with purchase agreements in NYSEG, and none in the Mid-Hudson service territory. So I can't say as to whether that's really come up. I haven't seen that in other utility agreements on streetlight system purchases. So, but you know, yeah. I don't know what to tell you on that point, other than to just make sure that the things that they shouldn't be including are not included.
Right. Other than Horseheads, have any other NYSEG municipalities converted that we know of?
West Seneca.
I know some have purchased.
Right.
Right.
Oh,
so they purchased, but did they convert already?
That's a good question. I don't know. Something that is interesting about the other NYSEG municipalities that have purchased their system, I don't think NYSEG does this anymore, but they had the utility continue to be responsible for maintenance. So in other words, they were still being charged a rate. It was just a maintenance-only rate.
Yeah, they have a different tariff or service class for that.
Right, but I know that the other utilities are eliminating that service, that rate class from their street lighting tariff. So I don't know. I'd have to double check and see if that's also being eliminated from the NYSEG tariff. But other municipalities have done it that way.
Thanks.
Sure.
Now, do we have Jeff Allison on the call? He had a series of questions.
Yeah, I'm here. I think you've answered some of them already.
Okay.
What is the NYSEG tariff rate? I think that you're sending a link to that so they will be able to read that. I don't know that we've answered, does NYSEG have a schedule for its own LED conversion?
So this is proposed. First of all, it's still there's nothing. They don't have an approved modifications to their tariff yet for LEDs, but they're going a different route than other utilities in the Mid-Hudson region. The other utilities, ONR and Central Hudson, well, Central Hudson is already doing this. They have a tariff on the books already, and they are just changing over to LEDs in the course of routine maintenance. So even if you don't request a conversion, they are making this conversion as a light. You know, as a bulb goes out on a high-pressure sodium, instead of replacing it, they just put in an LED. And then they will also, they will accelerate a conversion based on municipal requests. ONR has similarly proposed to upgrade its lights in the course of routine maintenance. And we would like to see NYSEG do this too, but this is not what NYSEG has proposed. NYSEG has proposed only to upgrade to LEDs at the request of a municipality, and under its proposal, it will only upgrade 15% of the lights in the service territory to LEDs per year, which means it'll take fully 7 years for a complete conversion if, you know, all municipalities requested it. so that is slow. And, you know, where you are in the queue, like say, you know, 50 municipalities in NYSEG territory request an LED conversion. It's up to NYSEG. I think it's sort of first come, first serve, but they get to really decide based on what they say are geographic considerations and other considerations. Again, this is just proposed. It hasn't been final. It hasn't been approved yet by the commission. So, and they will charge you the stranded asset costs of the lights being replaced. In other words, you're going to pay the net book value on the utilities books of the existing lights if you upgrade to those utility-owned LEDs. And so the economics of doing that, I mean, depending on what that value is, it's going to be potentially a number of years before you start seeing net savings. But, you know, also you have to ask, am I better off just purchasing the streetlight system since I have to pay that value? You're going to be paying you're going to be paying that value to purchase the system and no longer rent them. So, you know, you really have to compare the costs and benefits to your municipality of those two different routes to LED conversion.
Okay, great, thanks. And then there was some purchasing question, but I think whenever you schedule that next call, that will probably be covered. And do you have any recommendations on consultants that we might want to consider to help advise on this?
Well, to advise on what part? To advise on the, you know, so we hope that we can provide you with enough information that your municipality will be empowered to negotiate that agreement with the utility yourself. Are you speaking about for procurement purposes or procuring LEDs?
Well, I'm thinking of lighting plan,
right.
How to design it so that it's the right thing for the community, that kind of thing, because, I mean, we may be able to negotiate with NYSEG. However, do we have the ability to figure out what we really need?
Right, right. Pat, do you want to speak to that? Or anyone?
Sure. Yeah, well, you know, we have a long list of deliverables for this work we're doing for NYSERDA. So among the deliverables is that we will be offering RFPs, requests for proposal, drafts that you could amend as you see fit for your community, and they'll be written with the needs of your utility, with the requirements of your utility baked into them. So that is something we'll be coming out with in, you know, late winter, early spring. And I think that would go a long way toward getting you down that road. I will be sending out the names of the contractors that we've heard, you know, we've heard about and we know about have done good work in terms of the paper audits. You might have seen, those of you who are logged on by computer, I had a bunch of, when I was messing around with the agenda, I had a bunch of links up there on the screen, and I'm going to send all those out because it's kind of a summary of everything we've done since we started. And so there are links to a lot of resources there that we've mentioned that could be, you know, very helpful to you.
Great, thanks. If we were looking for financing to help with the cost of this, do you know if, has anybody heard of any of the grant financing requiring prevailing rate for labor costs? That had been an issue in a town near us, and it sort of took them by surprise because what they were negotiating, they weren't aware that the negotiations were at less than the prevailing rate, and they had some problems going back into that negotiation as a result.
I mean, as far as I know, you have to pay the prevailing wages as a municipality, but, you know, the prevailing rate.
Yeah, Jen, I've never done a contract where prevailing wages weren't a state requirement.
I mean, they are, as far as I know, they're required. It's required.
Well, I think it was a situation where the company was planning on not paying it, and it wasn't clear to the town. And then because it was grant financing, they got involved and said, you have to pay the prevailing rate, and that meant they had to go back to,
I mean, yeah, I would think even if it's not, even if grant financing isn't involved, I think they still, if municipal funds are being used, the prevailing rate has to be used. I'm fairly certain, and that should be, I would think that would be part of the RFP. But George, is that typically?
Yeah, all my RFPs require prevailing wages to be paid for prevailing wage work. And the other thing is I just want to mention, I think we, the MHSC group, have come to the conclusion that these RFPs that we're suggesting need to be designed to give you a complete package so that we address your concerns with someone that's there to assist you with a proper design and all the different steps necessary for you to get to a good end product.
Speaking of grant financing, it looks like we still have Carla and Nicholas on the call. Are you there, guys?
Yes, I'm here. This is Carla.
So do you want to, I don't know if you're already working with the communities that are on the call, but you could say a little bit about the Clean Energy Communities incentives?
Nicholas, why don't you take that one since NYSEG is mostly in your area?
Sure. So Clean Energy Communities program has, you know, a bunch of different action items, and LED streetlights is one of them. You have to have a minimum of 10 converted to LED or 50%. So a minimum, if you have less than 20 lights, you can't get credit under this action item. But I think it's a worthwhile thing to do, of course, to do the LED streetlights. It's not a quick one if you're interested in the grant money, but as we've heard from the conversation, it's a cost-saving thing, and I'm here to help out with all these things.
And Nicholas, correct me if I'm wrong. It's not a direct subsidy, but it's rather a competitive opportunity where the community would file with NYSERDA that they've performed these high-impact actions. And then there would be, if it's done in a timely fashion, there's the opportunity to receive a grant, which just has to be for a clean energy project, which could be the lights. Is that right?
That's right. We have in the Mid-Hudson region 10 grants left for communities under 30,000. So my community is in Sullivan County. You know, that's a possibility to get $50,000 in grant money if you do the four out of the 10 high-impact actions and get it in on time. You know, be one of those 10. You can get the money, and there's no reason why, from my mind, why you couldn't use that money towards purchasing your street lights, and then you'd have a lot more savings then, because then you wouldn't have to, you know, that's free, no match money that you can do towards a clean energy upgrade, and I think the demonstrated benefits, greenhouse gas emissions, and cost savings is there for NYSERDA to approve that. So I haven't heard anything that would suggest NYSERDA wouldn't see that as a viable project.
Right. So in the links that I'll be giving out, one of them or several of them will be to the Clean Energy Communities program and how you can reach Carla and Nicholas.
Great.
Thank you, Pat.
Thank you.
You bet.
Do you know when that procurement call will be?
We're trying to get our dates together. We're aiming for mid-March, I would say.
Okay, because that would seem like the reason for towns to move forward together is that of aggregating purchasing and that kind of thing. But other than that, it sounds like towns can move forward separately. They don't need to move together. Would that
well,
be
it
true?
could be a hybrid, right? You could start doing the information gathering that we've talked about, which is the billing audit, and even potentially a field audit. And you know, for small communities, we do have a how-to guide to doing that. And then we have the names of consultants who could do it for a larger community. So those are all things that can and should be done as soon as possible on your own. And then yes, the purpose of our consortium is to move cities, towns, and villages toward an aggregated purchase, you know, in a timely fashion.
Pat, there also is likely to be some value for municipalities in sharing with each other your experience in negotiating the purchase of your streetlight system with NYSEG. So as any of you have success in addressing issues in the NYSEG proposal, that will be valuable to share with the others. If you all have common concerns about aspects of the proposals you're receiving from NYSEG, it likely makes sense to try and work together to reach a resolution with NYSEG on those issues. So we would encourage you to think of each other as a resource in that process as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
Have you ever heard of towns aggregating their maintenance contracts with the same company?
Yes. George? You may be on mute.
Yeah, I was. Can you repeat the question, please?
I was. Have you heard of towns aggregating maintenance contracts together?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
In fact, the maintenance contract for the Cape Light Compact, which is 14 communities. Also, the PRISM program in Rhode Island is 27 communities have aggregated the maintenance. So to the extent that I can do that, I always try to add as many communities together as possible.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Sure.
Pat,
well,
Pat, this is Carla from HVRC. I was wondering, is at some point is there going to be almost like a step-by-step prepared for the process for purchasing streetlights, that just like a brief bullet point so that people can, municipalities can keep on track of what they need to do next in the line of purchasing their streetlights?
Yes. I mean, that's the purpose of the options report that Nina and Jen have done with George's substantial input. And then there will be a summary version of it for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And that's largely, that's really Jen's work. But that's a good question, Carla, because Jen has drafted a really valuable step-by-step guide that concludes the options report, and it may make sense.
The last chapter,
chapters.
Right. The last chapter is really meant to be almost a standalone that basically takes all of the findings from the rest of the assessment, but puts it into a kind of a step-by-step form. So that would be, you know, as soon as the whole thing goes through, you know, completes the peer review and, you know, is approved by NYSERDA for release, then we can, you know, pretty easily create a separate standalone document out of that. And by the way, that should be within the next couple of months.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. So we've gone a little bit over, but I think it was good. We got a lot of questions answered. I did record this call, so I'll make available a link to it. and we will be announcing the date of our procurement call in the very near future. Hopefully I can get it in the same email to you when I send these things. All right, well, thank you everyone for coming to the call. If you want to send me any kind of follow-up question or comment, I would appreciate it. That's great, you know how to reach me. And thank you all for rallying and coming to a rescheduled call. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.